They tell us that pleasure is the prize, something to chase, something to celebrate. But what if that's not the full picture? What if pleasure is not the prize, but the disguise? What if the chocolate you crave, the laugh you chase, the desire you feel? What if they're just masks, thin, attractive layers, hiding something much older, much deeper, and far more uncomfortable? Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt content, truly, deeply at ease, without reaching for anything? Not entertained, not distracted, not numbed. Just still. Just whole. Most of us can't remember. And here's the paradox. We live in a time overflowing with pleasure, yet we are starving inside. Carl Jung once warned us what we pursue for comfort is often the very thing that stops us from healing. So today, I want to help you see pleasure differently. Not as an enemy, but as a mirror one that reflects what we've been avoiding. Picture this. You wake up and without thinking, reach for your phone. You're not expecting anything urgent. There's no celebration waiting for you. But your fingers move before your brain even catches up. Habit takes over. A meme makes you chuckle for a few seconds. Then another scroll, another dopamine hit, another distraction. The hours drift by, and yet that gnawing feeling remains. The scrolling didn't soothe it. It just blurred it. So maybe you grab a snack. Salty, sweet, whatever's within reach. Not because you're hungry, but because you're empty. But here's the truth. What you needed wasn't food. And it wasn't the phone either. It was silence. It was stillness. It was the breath between thoughts you haven't let yourself take in years. Carl Jung talked about the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves we bury under noise and comfort. And pleasure. That's often the shovel. We scroll when we're not curious. We eat when we're not hungry. We crave attention when we don't feel seen. But we're not choosing joy. We're choosing sedation. And it's dangerous. Because each hit of shallow pleasure deepens our hunger for something real. Something nourishing. But the longer we numb ourselves, the less we even know what we're truly hungry for. That ache we keep trying to silence. It's not boredom. It's a hunger for meaning, for stillness, for a return to self. Let's go back. Picture yourself at 6 years old. You cry because you're hurting, maybe physically, maybe emotionally. But instead of being held or heard, someone hands you a cookie, turns on a cartoon, says, "Don't cry." And in that moment, something subtle but powerful happens. Your nervous system learns pain is not safe to feel. Feeling equals rejection. But performing, smiling, distracting, that earns approval. So you adapt, again and again. Until one day you're an adult who can't sit in silence without reaching for something, anything. Because stillness now feels like punishment. That's how most of us live. We drown the whispers of discomfort in the noise of pleasure. We turn up the volume on everything external so we don't have to hear what's been aching inside for years. That ache that says, "I just want to be seen. I just want to feel safe. I just want to be me." But pleasure has a memory. And every time we use it to escape, our nervous system remembers. It wires in avoidance. It equates stillness with danger. That's why silence makes your chest tighten. Why you can't shower without music. Why being alone feels like drowning. Jung knew this too. He understood that pleasure, when misused, doesn't heal, it hides. It becomes a shield, and eventually a prison. So before we dive deeper, I want to ask you for something. If this is landing, if you felt that subtle guilt after something that should have made you happy, then pause and share that moment in the comments. Not for me, but for you. Because naming it is the first step to seeing it clearly. Now let's talk about the trap. Imagine someone wandering through a desert chasing mirages. They see something glimmer in the distance. Run to it, but it vanishes. So they try again and again. That's what happens when we chase pleasure without purpose. The high never lasts. The craving always comes back stronger. But here's the twist. Real pleasure does exist. And it's beautiful. But it's quiet. It's subtle. It's not loud like a notification or addictive like a binge. It's steady. It's in the way you feel after finishing something you were scared to start. It's in the calm of waking up and realizing you didn't reach for your phone. It's in the slow, deep joy of being fully seen by someone who doesn't need anything from you. And yes, it's harder to access. But it's also the only kind that fills you. The kind that expands your life instead of distracting from it. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And in our world today, pleasure is the most elegant absurdity we've created. A gorgeous excuse to avoid ourselves. Let's rewind again. Childhood. You scrape your knee. It stings. You cry. And someone says, "Don't cry, have a treat." Or "Cheer up, let's watch something fun." In that moment, a blueprint is formed. One you carry for years, maybe forever. The blueprint says, don't feel fix, don't express escape. And slowly, pleasure becomes your translator. It speaks when your real self is too afraid to show up. But no one tells you the cost. That every time you swap feeling for stimulation, you lose a little connection with who you truly are. Jung warned us when we neglect our inner world, the outer world has to get louder. And isn't that what's happening? The scroll, the buzz, the binge, the endless ping, they're shouting. So we don't have to listen. But underneath it all, something is still whispering. That whisper is asking for meaning, for presence, for truth. Because pleasure is not evil. It's sacred when chosen with clarity. It becomes toxic only when we use it to run away from ourselves. So let me ask you this. Have you ever felt strangely hollow after indulging in something you thought would make you feel alive? Another episode, another message, another snack, another impulse buy. That hollowness, that soft ache, it's not shame. It's awareness. A part of you realizes you weren't actually fed. You were just distracted. And this is the part where most people get Jung all wrong. They think shadow work is about becoming darker, edgier, more intense. But the real work, it's softer, more courageous. It's looking at the moments when you betrayed your inner self and choosing honesty over habit. Let me tell you a story. There was someone I knew who jumped from one relationship to the next. They called themselves a hopeless romantic. But every time it ended, the same intensity obsession collapse. And when asked why, they said, "I just love love." But that wasn't true. They loved distraction. Because when they were alone, the silence screamed, and they didn't know how to face it. So romance became their anesthetic, until even that stopped working. And the scary thing, that story isn't rare. Millions of us live it, confusing craving for connection, mistaking numbing for healing, substituting quick hits for lasting joy. But the danger isn't in the pleasure itself. It's in never stopping to ask, why do I need this? Think back to a moment where you didn't give in. You paused. You felt the urge to scroll, to message, to grab the snack, but you didn't. You waited. And afterward, you felt something rare. Pride, peace, maybe even power. Why? Because that pause wasn't about restriction. It wasn't punishment. It was self-trust. And trust in yourself is one of the deepest highs a human being can feel. It tells your nervous system, I've got you. I'm not afraid of the quiet. I don't need to be rescued. And here's the wild part. When you begin to trust yourself, pleasure becomes beautiful again. Not a crutch, not a distraction, but something you consciously choose, not because you're escaping, but because you're celebrating. Picture this. You walk into a quiet room. No music, no notifications, just stillness. And instead of feeling anxious, you feel grounded, at home. Not because everything is perfect, but because nothing inside you is trying to run. That's what Carl Jung meant by individuation becoming whole. Not by denying pain, not by constantly fixing yourself, but by integrating all parts of you, including the ones you tried to silence. When pleasure becomes intentional, when it's no longer anesthesia, you begin to feel its richness in a whole new way. That's the shift from relief to reverence. But you don't get there by accident. You get there by paying attention, by slowing down, by lowering the noise just long enough to hear what's really going on beneath it all. So what does that actually look like? It looks like noticing the impulse to grab your phone the second you feel lonely and asking, what am I trying not to feel? It looks like sitting with the discomfort of silence instead of drowning it in sound or sugar. It looks like choosing the kind of pleasure that requires presence and effort, like a deep talk, a creative project, a long walk that has no goal. Because here's the thing nobody tells us, real pleasure is earned. It's built, not bought. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It waits for you to show up with intention. The best laugh you've ever had. It came after vulnerability. The best meal after a long day of effort. The best connection after you allowed yourself to be fully seen. That's the kind of pleasure worth pursuing. Now, I want to give you a moment to let this land. If this is stirring something in you, good. That's what real awakening feels like. It's not loud. It's not some grand epiphany. It's a quiet reckoning. A small voice inside saying, I want more. But not more noise. Not more comfort. More truth. Carl Jung believed that we don't suffer because of the trauma itself. We suffer because we refuse to face what the trauma left behind. And pleasure used unconsciously is one of the most seductive ways to keep avoiding that confrontation. But now you've seen it. The loop. The trap. The mirage. The way we confuse pleasure with healing, distraction with freedom. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So here's the truth that will challenge you the most. You have betrayed yourself. Not in some dramatic, obvious way, but in the small, everyday moments. Each time you reached for the quick fix. Each time you silenced your ache with another scroll. Each time you said, this makes me feel good, when really it just made you forget. That's the betrayal. But this is not about shame. This is about recognition. You were doing what you thought you had to do to survive. You were trying to soothe something that had no words. And now you're ready to listen. To turn toward what you once turned away from. To finally step into your life fully present. Because here's what happens once you stop sedating the ache, the old pleasures lose their power. That party that used to feel electric now feels hollow. The scroll doesn't hit the same. The hookup doesn't leave you glowing. It leaves you emptier than before. The binge doesn't soothe, it stings. Why? Because you're no longer mistaking stimulation for satisfaction. The real hunger was never for entertainment. It was for you. For connection. For honesty. For the truth you buried under layers of feeling good. Let me give you a metaphor to hold on to. Imagine your life is a house. And inside that house lives a younger version of you, the child who felt pain but didn't know how to express it, who wanted love but settled for distraction. But instead of going inside the house to be with that child, you built an amusement park in the yard. Lights, candy, noise, a party that never ends. And the child inside, still waiting. Healing isn't glamorous. It's not a highlight reel. It's walking past the carnival you built, stepping into the silence, opening the front door, and saying to that younger version of you, I'm here now. You don't have to wait anymore. You can speak. That's what Jung meant when he spoke about doing the inner work. Not to become enlightened in some mystical way, but to become whole, to make peace with the stillness, to let your nervous system know it's safe now. But here's the final myth I want to break, maybe the most important one. You've been told that happiness is the goal, that freedom means being able to do whatever you want, that if something brings you pleasure, it must be good. But that's not freedom. That's captivity in disguise. True freedom isn't the ability to indulge in everything. It's the ability to say, I don't need this to feel okay. Real power is not chasing the high. It's being able to sit in the stillness and not need anything to feel whole. That's the most terrifying, liberating thing of all. And that's why so few people get there. Because the world doesn't teach us how to be still. It teaches us how to be entertained. But once you stop chasing something, incredible happens. You start noticing what you used to miss. You start feeling again, not just the highs, but the depth, the richness, the subtlety of real life. And others will notice too. They'll say you've changed. You're quieter, slower, more intentional. You don't rush to text back. You don't always go out. You don't laugh at every joke. But when you do laugh, it's real. They'll wonder why. They might not understand, but you will. You'll know it's because you're no longer trying to escape. You're finally here. Here's the part most people never reach. The quiet power. The calm beneath the chaos. Because when someone stops needing pleasure to feel okay, they become something this world doesn't know how to handle. Present, undistracted, unshakable. The truth is, most systems in our world, marketing, social media, even relationships, rely on one thing: your emptiness. Your craving. Your need to feel good. That's how they sell. That's how they hook. That's how they control. But when you no longer need to be entertained, when you can sit in your own company and feel complete, you become immune to manipulation, immune to seduction, immune to addiction. Because presence, real presence, is the ultimate rebellion. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is not a dopamine-chasing machine, not a bundle of urges, not a puppet of cravings. You are a creator of meaning, of stillness, of deep-rooted, lasting peace. And here's the paradox. That peace, that depth, it's not always pleasurable. It doesn't feel like sugar. It doesn't flash like a screen. It's slow, it's inconvenient. Sometimes it hurts, but it nourishes. And that's what you've been looking for all along. Not stimulation, sustenance. So next time the craving hits the scroll, the sweet, the just one more, don't fight it. Don't shame it. Just pause and ask, what am I truly needing right now? That one question breaks the pattern. It interrupts the loop. It puts the power back in your hands, because the goal was never to eliminate pleasure. It was to reclaim it, to choose it, not need it, to use it as a celebration, not a sedative. That's the moment pleasure becomes sacred again. And yes, you will still laugh, still eat good food, still enjoy a late-night conversation, a good song, a moment of delight. But you'll do it awake, aware. No longer trading your presence for a quick hit. No longer calling relief joy, because the difference is everything. That awareness will transform your habits. It'll clean up your relationships. It'll sharpen your focus. You'll no longer chase validation from people who don't see you. You'll no longer buy things hoping they'll change how you feel inside. You'll no longer scroll past your own life, because the greatest pleasure of all is presence, and the greatest power is choosing it. Let's close with this. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're not failing because pleasure didn't satisfy you. You are awakening, and awakening is painful. because it requires you to grieve the illusions that once kept you safe. But on the other side of that grief is something extraordinary: self-trust, a kind of inner steadiness that doesn't need to be filled because it is full. You'll move differently, speak differently, breathe differently. You'll laugh less often but more deeply. You'll rest without guilt, work without needing to prove, love without needing to chase. And yes, people will ask, what changed? And you'll say with the quietest, most grounded kind of joy, I stopped running from myself. That's the work. Not to chase more, not to numb less, but to finally turn inward and really see that the thing you've been seeking through all that pleasure was you. So when the craving returns, as it will remember, you are not your hunger. You are the one who chooses how to feed it. And now you know the difference between a meal and a mirage, and that changes everything. Welcome home.